When first given the Conquest maps, they're not exactly made already for Conquest. They're very linear, which is exactly what we do not want when it comes to Conquest, as we're looking for something where there are multiple different pathways you can take and different opportunities along those different paths. The reason why they are linear when given is, well, quite simple. They weren't originally made for Conquest. Conquest is an idea that's come more recently than the maps themselves. So there's some steps that are done in order to be able to turn these maps from linear into less linear, but still not too open as to not make Conquest feel overwhelming. The first set of changes that are given are what I refer to as the initial changes. These are kind of the ones that convert it from a linear map into a Conquest map. These include changing the entire structure of the map. Instead of having one lane to having 3 lanes. This is often just by adding 2 more lanes onto the sides of it, and then having ways that those lanes can interact with the previously existing primary lane. Each map in Conquest also has something which is referred to as a map gimmick. For example, within AI3, that map gimmick is the portals connecting the different routes. So each one of the 3 different pathways have a portal where you are able to enter the different paths, along with these crystals which act as, I guess, nodes, which you have to deactivate 3 of them to be able then to deactivate the primary one and gain access to the final portal and the highest tier loot. The map gimmick is different between each map. For example, AI2 has a completely different one to the previously just mentioned one for AI3, that being that these are 5 crystals around the map. You need to break all 5 of them in order for a platform with the highest tier loot to descend onto the map where the players can access it. Along with adding 3 different pathways, and to ensure that they are not boring just long corridors, there also needs to be adding new locations. Within AI3, the locations that have been added are the Architect Church, the Cave Portal Room, as well as extending some of the previously existing corridors along the castle. After the initial changes have been done, we then move on to the first fixes. This will often be where I go to one of our more senior members, such as Nils, and speak to him about the way which the map flows. This can also include things like changes to the map gimmick. Like originally, the portal room was just going to be a cut through in a cave as a small little area, but ended up developing itself into one of the largest areas and most dominant areas of the entire map. Along with the map gimmick changes, there are also changes to the overall map layout. This can just help things move more smoothly. This can also include just details to the defining areas, such as the Bird Cathedral on AI2, which was already going to be a centerpiece, but the first fixes made it so this centerpiece was way more prominent and an obvious point of interest for players. After first fixes are out of the way, we then move on to some of the additions. These are just adding smaller details to those previously existing areas or the new areas. Again, this will often be done when me and Nils sit down in a meeting for about an hour and a half and talk out some of the things on the map. This is also the kind of area where the scene cinematics will be added, such as the floating islands, moving platforms, or flying debris, as we've seen in AI3 around the portals, and some of the rooms when you walk into them will have chunks of the walls pulled off towards the large portal area. Another part of the additions section is the introduction of environmental storytelling to the maps. For example of that could be in AI2, where you can see a battlefield and the toll it's taking on the surrounding areas, or that of AI3, the most recent addition to the lineup of Conquest maps, where you're able to explore an abandoned crystal mine and find within there a natural formation of crystals that have led to the creation of a portal. After additions, we then move on to the second fixes. These are just expanding on ideas. As previously mentioned, the cave portal was originally meant to be a small cut through, but during the second fixes phase, this led to it being a very prominent area and the current exit location of the entire map, meaning it is the largest structure and the last thing you see in the last fight you have on that map. During the second fixes, we also made the idea of having the Architect's invasion of AI2. This was a previously thought about idea, but this was kind of then decided in this phase to have it be a much more prominent feature. After the second fixes have been completed, we then move on to the final changes. This includes things such as fixing the collisions on some of the previously merged meshes from other maps, as well as merging some of the meshes within the current map you're working on. Without the final changes being done, there'll be areas of the map which will be close to a merged rock face or building where you just wouldn't be able to access, as Unreal Engine would have determined that that pathway is blocked off because of the current mesh. After merging the meshes and fixing some of the collisions on those previously merged meshes, we then move on to the addition of culling volumes. These additions can take a while as they're quite finicky and having to be done depending on each one of the maps. For example, the culling volume within AI2 is completely different to that of AI3, and that's just because of the distances of the sight lines and making sure that you're not seeing things pop out of existence and seeing them pop into existence. Another addition, which is in the final changes section, is the addition of fog, foliage, and smaller details, such as discarded weapons and bodies of battlefields and the skeletons of fights long before them. We then also move on to the loot distribution system. So obviously the loot, which the further you go into the level, is a higher tier to that of which you spawn right next to. This is part of what makes the game fun, and it increases the experience and drives the player forwards in the map, hopefully sparking an interest for them to be able to go further into the map and see more of what I've created there for them. Now we've taken a short look at the pipeline used to create the first 3 of the Conquest maps. I'm going to move on to what I'm going to be developing next. This will include the lobby for the Conquest game mode itself, where there are 2 different lobbies, which I can't really get too far into because that will ruin some of the surprise for you later down the line. All that needs to be said about it is just the addition of smaller areas which will allow the players to go through the lobbies and feel like they are in an interactable environment instead of the static menu, hopefully adding to an entire new level of enjoyment just by being in the menus. That can just be on your own exploring the different little hidden Easter eggs around the place, or in there messing around with your friends. I think we can all agree that one of the things which is missing from most modern games is that of menus where you're able to just mess around with your friends and have a small little bit of enjoyment between those mighty battles which you have been part of.